Hi, welcome to Wings for Life. My name is Ann Edenfield-Sweet. I'm the executive director and the founder of Wings. And tonight we have a very special guest, and I'm very excited about this. We've got David Gonzalez. He is the current chaplain at Southern New Mexico Correctional Facility in Las Cruces, New Mexico. But David has not only been a chaplain, but for many years, he's worked for 13 years in the corrections department. He worked as a correctional officer. And at Wings, we've never had a correctional officer speak and talk about what is the job of a correctional officer. And I'm so excited to have David because prior to COVID, I got to know him. I got to work with him in person. I know what a dedicated, caring man he is. And I thought, what a perfect man to tell us about what the job of a correctional officer is, but then why did he leave that job and go and become a chaplain? So I am so excited to welcome David Gonzalez to be with us tonight. David, tell us all about correctional officers and chaplains.
Hello, good evening. Thank you for having me. Like Ms. Edenfeld said, my name is David Gonzalez. I'm the chaplain at New Mexico Southern Correctional Facility. If you bear with me, I'll share my screen here. I'll start my presentation. So I titled my presentation, Life in Prison from the Other Side of the Line. And so like many people live at their jobs, or we spend the majority of our jobs at work or sleeping. And so 1/3 of my life is in prison. And the only difference is I get to come home and I get to sleep. I could suppose you would put myself in that image. So as Ms. Edenfield said, I have been in the field in correctional environment for the last 13 years of my life. I like to start with my favorite scripture. It says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." And so, as Ms. Ann said, I did spend the first 11 years of my correctional career in a privatized facility as a correctional officer. August 18th of 2008 was my start date. I would say that I was highly involved. I really, at first, to be honest with you, most people kind of take their job and say, "Well, you know, it's just a job." And I kind of really started getting into my job. And I really enjoyed what I did. I did all kinds of stuff in corrections. I was transport. I was what's called restrictive housing primary. I did control. I was certified crisis negotiation. I was in the honor guard. And of course, a slew of many other duties. I actually started my path wanting to finish school and doing something else with my life. And so I started going to school, changed, like many people, changed my my degree plan several times. And my actual plan was to get out of corrections. I wanted something different. I wanted out of the system. And obviously God had a different plan for me. So I like telling people now that he trained me for 11 years as a correctional officer to do exactly what I'm doing now as a chaplain for a correctional facility. So it's kind of the irony and the flip of that. I moved over to New Mexico Correctional Facility in August of 2019. So almost 11 years exactly as a correctional officer, and I've been a correctional chaplain for the last 2 years. So as a chaplain, I'm the religious coordinator for the Southern State, and also take care of most of the virtual training now for the entire state of New Mexico. And so I'm a volunteer coordinator in that sense as well. I like this picture. It's kind of funny. I'm always asked, "Wow, is it scary? You're in a prison." And I think maybe media has glorified the bad vibes of correctional environments. So I kind of like what my friends think that I do, what my parents think I do. My mom hates the fact that I work in a correctional facility. You know, what society thinks we do, what my boss thinks I do, of course, what I think I do, and what we actually do. So a lot of the stuff they show you on TV, you know, it's like, "Oh, is it like that?" You know, they take the worst possible situation and they put it on TV and they make people think that that's exactly how everyday living behind bars is. And believe me, from working at two different facilities in two very different environments, it's a rare occasion, and I'm grateful for that. So I kind of like to tell people what COs are and aren't. And so a correctional officer maintains a safe and secure environment for the population and staff. We're that unthanked law enforcement, the lowest form of law enforcement that people will consider, but we're still law enforcement. And so we're there to provide assistance in a time of need, and we assist movements in inter facility and or out of facility. So what that simply means is we're not there to be up in the faces of these guys. You know, these guys are doing some hard time. They are incarcerated. They've been sentenced, and they're doing their time. And we're actually not there to make life harder for them. We're there to make it a little easier. And so, as a correctional officer, I always used to love talking to these guys, and I guess in a sense, I've always done my job a little different than most. Uh, it comes with that long line of respect. It's the long said prison law, either their side of the line, our side of the line. Respect is respect. And in order to get respect, you got to give it. And so I used to like talking to these guys, and I was asked, well, how come you're not up in their business? And it's not that we need to be. The only thing we're there for is to maintain security and to make sure that everybody's doing what they should be. The word corrections means just that. When something happens or needs be, then the situation is corrected. So correctional officers do have to go through a rigorous process to even become a correctional officer. You must pass an extensive background, so it's the same thing as going for PD or for instance, a federal employment like the marshals or border patrol. You still have to go through an extensive background. They do have an 8-week academy, and believe me, at my age now, I probably couldn't pass that academy anymore. It is a physical test. Security works long hours. You have to have the ability to work under potentially dangerous circumstances, which is again that glorified media stuff. And really nowadays it's kind of taken a turn in what we do as correctional officers, and we're there more to rehabilitate them. Uh, and it's good. I like to say that we help to prevent recidivism, and it helps also to ensure the population is programming regularly. So even as a correctional officer, we're still trying to give them a better way of life. And so we do that providing a safe living environment for all population. Again, we're you can look at us as the peacekeepers inside of a facility. On the outside, it's the same way. Uh, a police officer is not going to come bang at your door just to see if you're doing all right. We're simply there just to provide that environment of security. I like to joke about this because, especially, with the friends, and a lot of people have a misconception of what's the difference between a correctional officer and a jailer or jail guard or a security guard. And so I kind of always chuckle, and it's like a correctional officer is considered law enforcement. So a jail guard, you have that comical cartoon image of somebody walking around with that baton, and whacking the guys upside the head and stuff like that. That does not happen. We're not jail guards. A jailer, I always picture somebody in a guard shack, watching TV and falling asleep halfway through a shift. And of course, the security guard, uh, we're not a for hire security guard who would be watching somebody's property. These guys aren't our property. They're simply in our custody and our care. So I like to say that idle hands are the devil's workshop, which kind of transitions me into what I do now. Uh, I heard Miss Ann say, "Why did I become a chaplain with corrections?" So there are a few good reasons. Like I said, I always joke about it. I wanted to get out of corrections. I wanted to do something different with my life. Being incarcerated for 11 years as a correctional officer, it can put some stress on the man, and so I wanted out. And I say God had a different plan. He trained me for 11 years to do what I do now. And believe me, I wouldn't want to do anything different. I love my job. And so as a correctional chaplain, I hope to make an impact in the lives of the incarcerated. And I want to do that to the best of my possibility. And that helps them while they're there. And it also helps when they get out, because I like to say that these guys aren't going to stay in prison for their whole life. Many of these guys are on the way out. And so if they're going to come back out to society, I want to try and make their lives as easy as possible to reintegrate. And I do that obviously through religious help, and we do it through programming in a facility. So why is programming and religion necessary? And so although recidivism is one of the big goals, you have to remember that some of these guys aren't going to get out really soon, and they're in there for the long haul sometimes. And so as a chaplain, it allows me to not only just care, but it allows me to get more involved and actually facilitate being able to make their life so much easier by providing religious services and guiding them spiritually when I can. Uh, and of course, as long as you're programming or you're going to church, you're less likely to want to do something that you're not supposed to do. Which is why I always like to refer to that the idle hands of the devil's playground, or idle minds of the devil's playground. And so, if not to reduce recidivism, it's also to help reduce the misconduct and also to ease the stress of these guys. Uh, I like to say that on Sundays, church is my battery recharge. So I go to church on Sundays, it recharges my batteries. I feel happy, I'm good in spirit, and it gets me through the week. And that's kind of how these guys use church. And so now for me, it's really awesome because I get to provide that service directly to them. Uh, and it's really fun. I really do love what I do. And knowing the security side of my job, it also allows me to do my job to the best of my ability, which allows me to get these guys exactly what they need without them getting in trouble. And so it causes cheer, and it's a less stressful environment, and it just makes everything so much nicer. NMCD percentages and numbers, I took these about a couple of weeks ago. Our average population through the state right now is about 5,725. There are about 14,000 plus on probation and parole, and our rate is still very low right now. It's 49%. We'd like to see that at a much, much lower percentage and just cut out recidivism in general. We want to get these guys back out there, and we want to get them integrated into population and just hoping to better themselves and just do things for themselves. Again, I really do love what I do. I've been in this field for 13 years. My mom thinks I'm crazy, and probably some of my friends think I'm crazy, but it really is not that awful working in this environment. And I think I've seen change in 13 years of corrections. I've seen great change because the strife and mentality is not they're inmates and we're going to keep them inmates. Now it's a visual of these guys are going to come out. Let's try and give them what they need so that when they come out into society, they're reintegrated and they're able to handle instead of having to get, put back in prison. So I always say that being locked up is punishment enough. We shouldn't have to push that any further than it already is. And I think I'm going to do this until I retire. I really do enjoy what I do. If you have any questions, you can feel free to reach me at my email, or you ever want to just chat, or you need some form of questions. I'm online, and my email and my phone number is here on my presentation. You can feel free to reach out to me anytime you'd like.
Well, David, I've got some questions for you. We've got a little bit of time left here, and so we'll just kind of do an interview, and that way you'll be able to respond to some of the questions that I might have. I'd like you to address a little bit more the definition between a correctional officer and a guard. I always have to do a training for our volunteers because they just talk about, well, the guards. And so if you could, I know you addressed it in that one slide, but if you could talk about it a little bit more, I'd appreciate that.
Sure. So again, being a correctional officer takes some training. It's not something that you could just go and plug somebody in. And so a guard, I guess, would be referred to somebody like, there's a home restaurant here in El Paso, and I always picture when somebody says guard, and it's some big burly guy, and he's sitting there with a gun belt, just sitting at the door watching people left and right, and won't ever do or say anything, and so we're not really guarding anything per se, and so it's almost a derogatory word. It's like being called a jailer or security, and so I think it's more of a respect thing. It's not an easy feat to get past this. Your physical, your mental evaluation to come in, and so it is a pretty lengthy process to become an actual correctional officer, and it's usually a transitional to higher up higher up law enforcement, like local police department, a sheriff, and even further into a federal position. And so it is looked at as a law enforcement agency rather than a security guard agency.
Thank you for sharing that. And I used to be a flight attendant, so I always use this as an example. I was never a stewardess. And so when I heard that word stewardess, that kind of was, irritating. And I've heard the correctional officers feel the same way. You are trained, you've gone through training, you just didn't get hired to do hourly work. You are a paid professional. And so I think it's really important for families and volunteers and for inmates to understand that the proper terminology is correctional officer or CO.
Of course.
Okay. Well, there you go. But a lot of people don't know that. So that's why I'm glad that you're sharing that. I have another question. What advice do you have for family members when they've got loved ones incarcerated? What are some of the things that you saw as a correctional officer, but also as a chaplain, especially now with COVID, they can't visit as easily as they used to be able to. What advice would you have for family members?
So that's a huge question, Miss Ann. And so again, this pandemic did bring some huge challenges, and even in my line of work now, I know that contact with people, and even ourselves as not being incarcerated, is a difficult thing, or was a difficult thing for a while, even for us to even leave our homes. And so I guess people got a taste of what it is to kind of, in essence, be locked down. And so I know these guys really miss their families, being able to see them in person. And they miss our volunteers greatly as well. The volunteers took a huge burden in bringing in all kinds of programming for our facility. So my advice to family, write to them, write as much as you can, keep them in the loop. I know the phone calls and phone time can be a little bit pricey, but the pen is the best way to go, and just write to these guys and encourage them and send blessings to them in most ways.
Okay. Well, thank you. Yeah, that's what I recommend to everybody as well, but it's always good to hear from somebody on the inside. Then I have a question for you. What kind of advice do you give the inmates themselves as far as trying to help themselves for, perhaps early release, ways to be more interactive with their family? So what kind of advice do you have for the inmates?
So there's a stigma between, I like to say there's that stigma between population and staff. And, for the longest time, I guess I could say it was that way, where an inmate was an inmate. I didn't talk to inmates unless I had to. And it was the other way around. I was like, well, he's the cops. I'm not going to talk to him. I don't need to talk to him. And so I think that stigma has loosened up a little bit, but there's still that fear of being labeled as one or the other. And so you'd be surprised, a lot of these guys, if you ask them questions, they'll sit and talk with you, That was what I used to do. And if somebody in population would come up and be like, CO, can you help me out with this? Yeah, sure. And most of the time, really, all we're doing is sitting there just kind of watching stuff happen. And it goes with the job. It's kind of, we're just providing security. And so I think as advice to population, it would be talk to a CO, ask them questions. You'll be surprised, 9 times out of 10, they're going to give you their time to speak to you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I think, you highlighted it earlier. You were talking about respect. It goes two ways. If you respect the inmates, they're going to respect you. And then you both have a lot to learn from each other if people will take the time to sit and talk. And certainly as a chaplain, that gives you more opportunity to do that. But still, even as a correctional officer, there's a lot of interaction, and I know there are a lot of really wonderful correctional officers out there that have really impacted the inmates and helped, help direct them in a path that help them get out and not recidivate. I know that I always recommend programming and try to tell everybody to take every class, do every possible thing that you can do. Can you share with us some of the opportunities that an inmate might have today during COVID, and then also things that were available beforehand. And certainly when things open up, we hope that that will also open up new opportunities for them. But can you share a little bit about what's going on and what kind of programming is available to the inmates right now?
Of course. And so that's the great thing about corrections now, and the gearing towards what we call the reentry process. And so there are so many good programs out there now, and not even just to discredit religious programs. I'm talking about college classes, GED classes. You've got I have to brag on my guys, the ministry mentors, which are population. They're inmates who are usually there for long term, who have gone to a 2-year seminary program and are now peer level mentors. And so what that means is these guys go and they mentor their peers on their level, and they minister to them. And so that's one other option. We have at our facility, we have one program called the Pause program, and they literally bring dogs from the shelters, and they're brought to some of these guys, and these guys will train the dogs, and they'll get them ready to also go to a loving home. We also have a program called we have Goal, we have Christian Service Club. We have so many peer mentor level orientation kind of style programs. We have Wings for Life. We have my goodness, there's so many. You know, I could go on probably for about an hour just naming them all off.
Well, I know there are a lot of various programs, and a lot of times families don't know all the things that are available. And I always like to share with inmates, the one time I visited in a Colorado prison, and I was just talking to the inmates, and we weren't doing any programming yet. We were going in to preliminarily meet with them. And so I said, is anybody going home anytime soon? And this one guy raised his hand and he said, yeah, I'm going home. And I said, well, how long have you been there? 29 and a half years. I said, 29 and a half years? I said, what in the world have you been doing all these years? Well, he looked at me and he was puzzled. He crossed his arms, crossed his legs, he hemmed, he hawed. He waited about 60 seconds, maybe 90 seconds. I don't know, it was a long time, but I just wanted to wait to hear what he had to say. And finally he said, well, I guess I've gone to the wait pile. I said, you mean to tell me you have spent 29 and a half years out of your life and all you could tell me is you've gone to the wait pile? I said, there has to be something more that you've done. And so I'm sure, David, as that caring chaplain and as that caring correctional officer too, I'm sure you encourage people to do more than just go to the wait pile. But a lot of times families don't know about what's available to them.
So what's cool about that is that it's I'm a small fraction of that direction. So our facility, like most in the state, have your unit managers and you have your case managers, and they all also help you locate and find a program. Here's another example. We have a group called Project Echo. So these guys come in, they train about 5 to 10 inmate population, and they'll show them the complications of Hep C and with sharing needles, and so they'll educate them in that field, and then these guys will teach these classes weekly to these guys, and they help educate population. And so when I say there's programming out there, it's not just to keep you mentally busy, it's to educate you to be able to use this stuff, and hopefully when you get out, you can use this stuff out in public. There's a ton of programming, you know, and I'm surprised that more people don't know about it. And I think, again, that's because of the glorification of the violence that they put on media. What you guys see on TV, you know, like this, I don't even know the names of the shows. I live in a prison, I don't want to watch shows, but they glorify all the bad stuff. And I can tell you, I can attest in 13 years, I'm grateful that there's only a few times where I've seen bad stuff like they show on TV. It doesn't happen very often.
You know, there are so many wonderful things that actually happen in prison. And I've literally heard probably tens of thousands of inmates say, if I hadn't gone to prison, I probably wouldn't be alive today. And so there are a lot of really wonderful things. Tell us about the GED program. I know there's a thrust to get everybody that is incarcerated at least to the level of a GED before they release out. Can you tell us a little bit more about that program?
Sure, it's a little out of my realm since it's our educational department, but again, it is the goal of at least of our state to try and at least get everybody to that level. And I like to say that if you at least gone through the GED, people start to get a liking of that, and that GED is just a doorway for them to excel. We have so many different style courses that will get you in the field or in the style and know-how of wanting to do stuff. You get your GED, we have a virtual tractor program now. It trains and certifies you how to drive a tractor, and they have the equipment for it to show you how to do that. That's one small example, but the GED, it is only a doorway, and they're using it to encourage these guys to further continue their education. And so, yes, we are trying to get everybody at least a GED, but 9 times out of 10, I see that GED just spark that I want to know more. And that's that encouragement that we push forward.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, I've been around for a long time doing wings. We're into our 26th year this year. And I've seen huge changes in our corrections department and really across the country and really the world. And so I'm really proud of our correctional staff and all the changes that they're trying to make and all the things that whole attitude about we're trying to correct things. We're not trying to be punitive and trying to provide really solid reentry plans for people. And I know that the returning citizens that I talk to are very, very grateful for everything that you do. Well, is there any last word that you want to give us as a chaplain? Maybe some words of advice for inmates and for family members that might be listening?
So I said a lot about reentry and recidivism, and I know in our facility alone in most of the state, some of those words are kind of hard to swallow for these guys, because I know they'll either be in for a really long time or they'll be in prison for the majority of their lives. And so I'd say to them this: take advantage of all this stuff, do something for yourself. Expand your mind, if not only for yourself, but to make your environment better. It would be pointless to just sit in a room and just decay to yourself and not do anything. And I know it's hard to believe, but a lot of us really do care for you guys. I apologize. A lot of us really do care for you guys. And again, there's that bad stigma that's been come and given to us in corrections for the longest time. And I can speak for a lot of people and say that we really do care. All you got to do is ask. Just stop a CO and say hello. I guarantee you he's going to say hello back. We're not here to make life difficult. We're here to help make your life easy, at least. And I guess for what it would be worth, more enjoyable, even though you are incarcerated. The time locked up alone should be enough punishment.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you, I hope every correctional officer is as caring and kind and compassionate as you are, and certainly could say the same for every chaplain. So I know the men down at Southern in Las Cruces are very blessed to have you as a chaplain. And thank you, David, for everything that you've done and for sharing. Now, if you are part of our Facebook audience, I'm going to read a story. And then our program will end. But if you are part of our Zoom audience, we are going to then go into breakout rooms. You'll be able to talk to David in one of those breakout rooms. Then we gather everybody back together, and then you'll be able to ask David more questions and find out even more. So we are so grateful that you are here with us tonight. Our closing story, I was trying to think of, oh boy, what could I tell as a closing story that might tie into this one? And this is called The Oyster. So let's see if you like this one. There once was an oyster whose story I'll tell, who found that some sand had gotten into his shell. It was only a grain, but it gave him great pain, for oysters have feelings, although they're so plain. Now, did he berate the harsh workings of fate that had brought him to such a deplorable state? Did he curse at the government, cry for election, and claim that the sea should have given him protection? No, he said to himself as he lay on a shell, since I cannot remove it, I shall try to improve it. Now the years have rolled around as the years always do, and he came to his ultimate destiny. Was it stew? And the small grain of sand that had bothered him so was a beautiful pearl, all richly aglow. Now the tale has a moral, isn't it grand? What an oyster can do with a morsel of sand? What couldn't we do if we'd only begin with some of the things that get under our skin? The moral of the tale is make the best of who and what you are, and any situation, the outcome depends on you. If you don't, you too could end up alongside the oyster in a stew. Well, it's kind of fun, but how many people actually end up incarcerated behind bars and they become that beautiful pearl? And that's what we want. We want to help people to become the very best that they can be. We know with chaplains and correctional officers like David Gonzalez, that is possible. So hope you've enjoyed being with us tonight. Again, stay tuned if you're on Zoom, because we're going right to breakout rooms. Thanks, everybody. Good night.